Oklahoma City on the 25th of August, 1988. I'm Dr. James Williams from the U.S. Army Military History Institute, and I'm interviewing Mr. Ed Niedermaier. Mr. Niedermaier, would you please just give me your name and age and so forth?
I am E.J Niedermaier. I was born July 5th, 1895, 93 years old now, and I entered the service at Camp Dodge, Iowa, February 22nd, 1918, and they went into the 350th Infantry. After about 30 days, I was transferred to and sent to Camp Custer, Michigan, where they were getting a regiment of engineers together. I went at Camp Custer. I went into the 55th Engineers, Camp Company A, 55th Engineers, and during the basic training, why I got the regular training, but as short as they were of those trained, they put me to training the others in the basic training. I did that for most of the time I was in Camp Custer. We left Camp Custer June 30th of 1918 to go overseas. I left from Hoboken, New Jersey on the ship, I can't think of the name of it right now. Anyway, we landed in Brest the 13th of July. There were 40,000 of us landed that same day at Brest. After a few days of being sent here and there on jobs, it was finally, after about 10 days or 2 weeks, I was sent to Camp Monterchaume, close to Châteauroux, France. It is a service of supplies. I can't tell you very much about combat service because the service supplies didn't get close to the front. But you know, to have an army, you have to have everything that they need. Food, clothing, medicines, and all war materials, that all has to be furnished. France didn't have any. It had to come from the United States. And in Camp Monterchaume, they just didn't have very much for anybody. They were coming in too fast. When we got there, they didn't even have barracks for us. They had a pile of material there, sections of barracks, and we had to put up barracks before we could have a place to live in. So about the next day before we had barracks for us to be in, but there wasn't anything there, no accommodations close to where our barracks were, no sanitary arrangements or anything. So that all had to be fixed up. After about a week or so, we learned what we was supposed to do. I was assigned to building warehouses. The three of us were assigned to doing different parts of building the warehouses. Before we got the warehouses built, the supplies began coming in. I saw large piles of flour out in the open, no place to put it, raining on it, and also a large stack about as big as a house of picnic hams being rained on. So we had to start to get these warehouses built. There were 3 phases of building them. They already had built railroad tracks to for the warehouse to be close to. The first group, they dug the holes and set the poles for these warehouses. The second group built they framed them up, 2x6s on the top and sides about 3 foot apart. And that was the framing. They lined them up and framed them. My job was to put sheet iron on these warehouses on the roof and then later on the sides. They would give me about 30 men. I never knew what kind of help I was to get. Most of my help was Italian labor men from Italy. They couldn't talk English.
Do you know how those people came to be there?
Yes, they came to be there because the United States was needing help for labor so they wouldn't have to use their enlisted soldiers. These Italians were trustees out of the Italian penitentiaries. Their penitentiaries were running over, and they had to do something with them. So they took the trustees. Now these men, some of them were criminals, some of them were in the army. Italy was having a hard time and been defeated in 2 or 3 battles, and quite a few of their soldiers left and left the army and went back to Italy, and of course they naturally put them in the penitentiary. Well, we got the deserters and the trustees of the criminals, and that's what I had mostly. Of course, sometimes I had German prisoners. They'd send about 30 German prisoners with a guard, and other times I might have, if they didn't have enough help, I might get white soldiers of Americans, or other times black soldiers, because they were separated in World War I. And I will say that the American soldiers were the best workers, the best I ever got. However, we got the job done with what we had. We built about 60 of these warehouses. They ranged in size. They were all about 50 feet wide and 21 feet at the eaves. They ranged in length from 394 feet to 504 feet long. And that was mostly my job while I was in France. I really, it wasn't much work. It didn't require very much knowledge of the work. Nearly any of us knew how to put on sheet iron, and if I didn't, my help did. So most of my job just assigning what they were supposed to do, and they went ahead and did the job. And I would say we did a good job too. I forgot to say, I had even a time or two got Chinese got the help from China, Chinese laborers, and so we just did the best we could as help.
Do you have any idea how the Chinese got there?
Huh?
Do you have any idea how the Chinese got there?
They were sent there by the Chinese government for labor to help out.
As hired labor, or?
As hired labor, yes. These were all hired from the Italian and Chinese government, and there were more Italians than there were Chinese.
How did you overcome the language difficulties?
Well, it was pretty hard sometimes. Now with the Italians, a few times I had an interpreter, but maybe there'd be 1 or 2 in the group that we'd get by. They could talk enough English I could get by, And it was terrible with the Chinese. They didn't have an interpreter. I just had to show them and to get them started. I couldn't understand. Couldn't understand what they were. One of the thing about the Chinese, I didn't know what they were. I never thought but what they were all men. But they had an inspection, and they found about a half a dozen women among the men as laborers. So we got all kinds of help. But anyway, I didn't get away from that camp until nearly till the middle of June. They had, for me, they had other work planned. We had to clean up and gather up all the spare supplies, poles, or just everything. Had to gather up and stack up everything in order. Had to police the place before we could get away. My last job was going into our barracks, and I had German prisoners to go in there and clean it, sweep it out, clean it out. We'd have about 40 or 50, maybe possibly 40 men in a barracks, and a lot of those barracks there where all of our men stayed. They had to get rid of all the trash and sweep out and clean up, and I was holding up our company from going to where they would be inspected and getting ready to be sent home. And I was holding them up, and I would try to get my German prisoners to work harder, and they didn't seem to care whether they did or not. And we were all day getting that. We didn't get away until night on account of getting the thing policed up. I left, by the way, I thought of the name of the ship I went over on. It was the Siboney, and we landed at Brest. We left after going to 2 or 3 places for inspection for this or that around France. We were sent to Saint Nazaire and had another inspection at Saint Nazaire, and we left Saint Nazaire the 26th, I believe it was, 26th of June, landed in France on July 4th, 1919. We were sent to debarkation port there, and the Red Cross gave each one of us a blank form to fill out to mail to our folks that we were back in the United States. Then we boarded a ship there to go to Long Island. We landed at Long Island. We went out to Camp Mills in Long Island for be deloused and inspected and getting ready to be sent to our camp where we would be discharged.
How did you find the sanitation conditions in the camps in France?
Well, I was only in the one camp. It is very good. After we got it fixed up and built up, it was nice. Well, I won't say, not modern or like that. It was just out on previous built out in the prairie, but we did the best we could. When we got when we got to Camp Montershom, there's no provisions for sanitary provisions or bathing, and I didn't get a bath for about 3 weeks. And on Sunday, when we weren't working, they got a couple of trucks and took us out to a French farm pond to get a bath on a Sunday afternoon. We, of course, didn't know anything about French customs in France or we were just mostly farm boys that off the farm, had never been too far from home. And we got out to this farm pond. It was out in a field, no houses around. But anyhow, some of the French saw our trucks there, and here they come, men and women, to watch us take a bath. And they sat on the bank there, and we were rather, our first experience with the French people, we were rather embarrassed at first. We realized we didn't need to be, but they didn't think anything about the women didn't watching us get out of the water and all that. It was just they were their custom of living. They didn't think much about it. I landed back in the United States on July the 4th, and after about a week, possibly more, I don't remember the number of days, but we were sent back to Camp Dodge, Iowa, to be discharged. I and my, when they would give us our, I would try to get by with, get some, we weren't allowed to bring any souvenirs home. We're supposed not to. Anyhow, I had a German Army rifle. I managed to hide that under my pack when they were giving me, when they were looking over. And each time I managed, I took the rifle apart, sawed the stock in two, and put it in my pack each time. And got by with it, and I still have that German Army rifle. I did get back with a German officer's helmet and a few little things.
How did you get a hold of those?
Well, I bought this German Army rifle off of another fellow that I don't know where he got it. He said he got it up in the front lines, but I don't know. He told me that. But anyhow, I just wanted something, and I bought this rifle. I got back with a few little things that I could. We were allowed to bring little things in our pack, but nothing large like a rifle or anything like that. That is forbidden. So we could get a permit, I think, but I didn't get a permit. I just smuggled it home. And I was discharged, I can't remember the day it's on my discharge, about August 14th or 18th, actually, I don't remember, but when I was given a $60 in money and a railroad ticket to the nearest railroad depot where I lived. And so after getting home, I'd always been on the farm, and I knew I wouldn't be satisfied. So having no funds except the $60, not much more than the $60 they gave me, I had to find a job. There wasn't any jobs in this rural farming area where I had lived. My folks had moved to another place. My parents had moved to another place. So I went to Kansas City, and I had an uncle in a factory in Kansas City, and he had told me before I went into service that when I got out, if I wanted a job, it'd come down to him, and he'd find me a job. He got me a job at the place where he worked. He was a foreman of a department there. There was so much resentment after World War I of the veterans coming in and taking the job and making the jobs scarce for those that were there, especially in Kansas City. And I just went down there. I hadn't lived there, and I went down there. And so my uncle had told this employment manager to give me a job. he, me being a veteran, he gave me the poorest job they had, painting some sheets of steel along with other laborers. When my uncle found out, he went to him and he told the employment manager he wanted me to have a better job. So they put me to learn welding, and I learned the welding trade. Wasn't a very good welder, but after 10 months, I learned that I could, as a welder, I could get more money in Oklahoma City. So I came to Oklahoma City June the 10th in 1920 and went to work the same day I landed at the American Steel Tank Company here in Oklahoma City. I worked there a while, and I spent 8 years there, and had learned to be a first-class welder there. Became their troubleshooters. They made material for the oil fields, tanks and things like that, and sometimes they would need some repair, and I became their troubleshooter, going out the oil field and making repairs or adjustments on the material they sold. And I stayed with them, and then I went to work with the Hughes Tool Company here in Oklahoma City. Work got slack at the tank company, wasn't much to do, and I could get a job with the Hughes Tool Company on their bits, repairing. The bits would get worn out, and we would work on them. I worked with them for 2 or 3 years. Then in the oil field struck, and I got a job for a while in the oil fields, welding in the oil fields, and I didn't like that very well, and I worked at welding in 2 or 3 places. I worked for another company, and in 1930 I quit welding because I didn't want to be a welder all my life. So I worked at sales work and other jobs. I did a little bit of everything.
Mr. Niedermaier, your ancestry is German, isn't it?
My father came from Germany in 1887.
When my understanding is during World War I, there was a lot of resentment about things that were German. Did you run into any of that?
I never saw any resentment. We were treated wonderfully, no different, because my father became a naturalized citizen in he was naturalized, I think, in 1902. We have the records at home, but my memory is poor now. But he became an American citizen. However, he was a loyal. But he came here when I was a child growing up. He didn't want German spoken in the home. He says, "We are Americans. We live in America. I want us to talk English." Very seldom they talk German. My mother's people were German too, but they very seldom talked German. So I learned very little German when I was a child. You know, he never did learn to speak plain English, but he tried, and he wanted us to be Americans. So I never did see any resentment. There weren't very many Germans around where we lived, but I never heard of any, really, because where my grandparents lived, there were a lot of Germans lived. My grandfather, my mother's father, came from Germany, and I never heard of anything in World War I against those that were descendants of Germans.
Did you become involved with the American Legion then after World War?
Yes, I did about 1920. I landed in after being in when I first came to Oklahoma City in 1920. I joined the American Legion in 1920 is the first year I was here, 1920. I wasn't settled before that, just got out of the Army in 1919, but it's 1920 I joined the American Legion and attended meetings here in Oklahoma City. Attended the National Convention of World War I Convention in Kansas City in 1922. Having lived there and worked there, I was glad to go back and visit. So, and then I was married in 1923 and got involved with raising a family and really became active in the American Legion. I got back into the American Legion in 1932 and became very active.
How did you happen to be attracted to or find out about the American Legion and
Well, just by word of mouth, and I have always felt like patriotism has always been very strong in my mind, and just to be associated with a patriotic organization, I got back into it. I was living at Norman, Oklahoma then when I got back into the American Legion. My wife died in 1939. After she passed away, I became very active in the American Legion and was one of the district commanders in the American Legion in 1951. And I was active later I became active in volunteer work. I wasn't married at the time, and became active in volunteer work at the VA hospitals. In working with the American Legion, we gave parties for the patients at the VA hospital. Before the present hospital was built, they had a temporary hospital out near the where the airport is now, and I went out there to see the director of the hospital, talk to him about giving parties for the patients, and so I visited with him. He noticed in visiting with him in his office that I had a deficiency in my hand. He asked me about that, and I told him that I had a bone chip in my elbow, and he said, "Why don't you have it taken out?" I said, "It's not bothering me, and I'm not worried about it now." And he says, "You better have that taken out." He sent me back to somebody else in the back part of the hospital and had me registered with them and arranged to have this taken out. This was in 1951.
Mr. Niedermaier, let me stop just a second here and flip this tape over.
Okay.
This is side 2, an interview with Mr. E.J Niedermaier. Mr. Niedermaier, you're talking about going to the hospital, about a bone chip there.
I had surgery and they moved that bone chip out of my elbow, and that was in the old hospital. And then I became inactive for several years. I moved away from Oklahoma City for a short time, and I wasn't active in hospital work. However, I moved to Lindsay, Oklahoma, and while there, I became the commander of the American Legion at Lindsay. I have a picture now. I was real active, and in fact, I doubled the membership in the Legion the year I was there. And while I was there, they discussed building a Legion home. I have a picture now at home of me accepting a deed from the mayor of Lindsay so we could build a home in Lindsay. I left there after I became the Chamber of Commerce manager while I was when after my year of, in the meantime, I sold out in the business, and when I left my business, the next year I became the Chamber of Commerce manager in Lindsay. But I still wanted to get back to Oklahoma City after a year as Chamber of Commerce manager. I came back to Oklahoma City and became active, and then is when I was elected district commander. I got acquainted then with the World War I organization. In the meantime, I joined the VFW too, and worked with them. And when I became acquainted with the World War I organization, they needed help so bad, and it was something I wanted to do, so I became active with them. And when I joined up, they put me to getting membership. I have an award at home now where Mr. Ray Aiken, a past national commander, he became past national commander later, but he was the quartermaster of the barracks that I went into when I first joined the World War I organization. And he asked me to do membership work. After the first year, he gave me an award for the members I got in the organization, and he later became the national commander. He worked himself up. About that time, I moved to Norman, Oklahoma. My first wife, parents lived close to Norman, and I moved to Norman, Oklahoma, and became very active in the American Legion down there. And Mr. J.B. Cook, also the past national commander, lived in Norman, and I got acquainted with him, and I've been active in the World War I work ever since. I've held every office. In 1966, I married Louise Lane of Dallas. She came up to Oklahoma to a region meeting, and I met her, and that was it. So I left and went to Dallas, where she lived. At the time, I was a commander of a new barracks. They had barracks 2589 that they had put in here in Oklahoma City. And when I went down there, they immediately wanted me to be the barracks commander there, but I wouldn't take it at first, and later I did. And I've been very active. Been commander most of the time. I've been in Dallas of this barracks. And there were 8 barracks in Dallas County at that when I went there. But now there's only one left, the barracks I have. I'm a barracks commander and quartermaster, and really don't have any officers anymore but sergeant of arms and chaplain. That's all I have left. I'm everything else, I guess. I know I do the quartermaster work because I have had several quartermasters, but the last 2 or 3 have died, and so I couldn't keep one, so I've taken it over myself. I get out a monthly newsletter and mail it out to my members. And during the time, I have held every office, the district commander, the department commander, and the regional commander. I've held offices, the national office has been hospital and nursing home chairman for any number of years, and we used to have an information desk at our national conventions, and I would man that information desk and let every put up a bulletin board, put where the meetings would be held and all the potent information. The reason I got started at that in Miami Beach, Florida, they held the convention in two different hotels, and it was a mess. I'm giving an interview. Get back just a minute to it. I'm giving an interview. Can you cut this off?
He's got all that.
Mr. Niedermaier, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Maybe lead back in. I'm curious about how it was that, perhaps you know, that the World War I veterans became a separate organization from the American Legion.
Yes, when World War II was going on, they discussed that in the national conventions. They voted to take them in as members.
This is the World War II veterans?
The World War II, yes. Take World War II veterans in. And there was quite a bit of confusion, but some of them didn't want to. Leave it just World War I. But they took the World War II veterans in. Well, naturally, they were full of vinegar and wanted to do things, and they became active from the very. They got a few of them took office right from the very start, and after several years, about 4 or 5 years, there was quite a bit of. You see, the World War I soldiers had outlived their partying time when they had their bars and striptease shows and all that. They had outlived that. They didn't want that anymore. Well, the World War II veterans, they were right in their prime. That's what they want. They want a place where they could shoot dice, have a bar, and there was quite a bit of a confusion about that. So in 1948, in Cleveland, Ohio, a few veterans gathered at a hotel there and discussed that. They had their first meeting. I don't have the name of the hotel there, but anyway, they had their first meeting, and of course it went from there, and the World War I organization was chartered in 1958. And they, of course, expanded from then. They got the national charter, and the auxiliary was chartered later. And of course, I've been active in the World War I organizations ever since about 1951. I didn't know about it until about 1951, and I've been active, been a barracks commander or something, been active in membership and helping. And it wasn't until about 1964 that I became a barracks commander. But I was very active in membership. Membership was my main project. And during that time, I was active as a volunteer at the Oklahoma City VA hospital. They had built a new hospital here from the time I was a patient out at the old hospital. And they built a new hospital out on 13th Street, and then I became active in volunteer work for the hospital again. And
let me ask another question, kind of spin-off. During World War II, I believe, and possibly Korea, and certainly during Vietnam, some of the folks who were active in the American Legion were very heavily involved in the selective service system on local boards and things like that, on drives to get folks to register and be recruiting. Were you involved in any of that activity?
No, I wasn't. While ago, while I was interrupted a few minutes ago about this interview and telling about the controversy between the World War I and World War veterans. At 1950, I was a district commander in Oklahoma City and was at a American Legion post up on Post 35 on Northwest 10th Street that an evening, and somebody telling me that Post 13 in Capitol Hill was having a meeting that night. Well, I knew that the World War II, the commander and the adjutant, they were World War II veterans. They had, and they resigned over this controversy. They wanted to have a bar and have what they wanted. Well, the World War II veterans had to raise the money to pay for this Legion home, and they were opposed to it. So these World War II, the commander and his adjutant, they just said, well, if they couldn't have a bar, they just resigned, which they did resign because they didn't want to have more to do with it. Well, I went out to this meeting, and they were there. The commander that, World War II commander that resigned, he came to me and he says, well, I thought it over. And he said, I shouldn't be so controversial. He says, I'll just go ahead and be the commander and go ahead and work. I says, no, you won't. I says, you resigned and they've accepted your resignation, and I'm going to have a election here, and I'm going to have them nominate a World War I man, and we will elect a commander. If you're elected, fine. If you're not elected, whoever's elected will be the commander. So I actually run into the controversy that they were having at that time. That's my experience in the controversy. So they went ahead, and I don't know what I moved away from Oklahoma City then, and I didn't know what they had done about it later, but I do know that the World War I veterans kept their Legion home like they wanted it.
Is there, we have just a few minutes left probably on the tape here, is there anything particular that stands out to you looking back over the time, either that you were in World War I or the associations that you've had with World War I veterans or the American Legion as a result of you being in World War I, that particularly stands out in your mind that you'd like to comment about?
Nothing particularly in the American Legion. I always got along fine, and in fact, I did not want to be district commander, but the group got together and insisted, because there was a man who was wanting to be district commander they didn't want, and they persuaded me to, they said if I would accept, they'd see that I was nominated and elected, so that's how come me to be district commander of the American Legion. But I enjoyed the work. I've enjoyed all the work in the American Legion and what little I did in the VFW, and especially I've enjoyed the World War I work. I have worked on my main work through the years has been membership. In fact, I still get members. As hard as World War I veterans are to get to join the organization, I got 10 new members, not transferred members, or I got 10 new members last year. And I had in time got as many as 20 new members in a year. So I think membership, and if the World War I organization did more about getting publicity when they were first organized, because so many World War I veterans do not know that we have a World War I organization. Even now, I got a man in a while back for a new member for 1989 that did not know that the World War I, he was active in the American Legion, but he did not know we have a World War I organization. I gave him one of my monthly newsletters, and I met him at the VA hospital, and I told him I would send him a torch, our national paper out of Washington. And I did. I sent him the torch. Just in a couple of days, I got it back. I told him our dues is only $5 a year. And he wrote me a nice letter, how glad he was that he met me, how glad he was to be a member. He sent me a $5 check for membership. And while he's hardly able to go now, his mind is good, and he was glad that he met me so he could be a member of the World War I organization.
Mr. Niedermaier, just for the record on this, I'd like to ask, normally we try to make interviews like this open to anyone who wants to have access to them. Is that agreeable to you for these, or for people to be able to make copies of these tapes?
Oh, yes. Okay. I'm glad to share, because I always glad to learn what others are doing. Like I said, I get out a monthly newsletter, and I send my newsletter to other barracks or even departments that get out a newsletter, so I can get a copy of their newsletter, and their information helps me, and I copy their newsletters. I don't hesitate. I don't ask for permission. If they've said something that helps my newsletter, I use it. And if they don't want me to use their stuff, they just not send me the newsletter. I want them to use my newsletter if I have anything that they want.
Well, thank you. Mr. Niedermaier, you had mentioned about the difference in the treatment that veterans of different wars got. You mentioned that there really was some resentment of World War I veterans. I'd like for you to talk a little bit more about that kind of thing.
You know, when the World War I veterans were discharged, they were given $60 and a railroad ticket home. That's all they got. They work was more or less scarce. We had to get a job, and there was a resentment against us getting jobs. Well, we remembered that when World War II came along. We thought we'd like to have something, so they would get something besides something to go on when they got out of service. So they worked out the GI Bill with the government, with the Veterans Administration. They got behind the GI Bill that the returning veterans could have, could buy homes with a government loan, could have on-the-job training, educational training, and other things that they could get the benefit of to help them get started back in life. So the GI Bill went over, and people don't remember that the American Legion was the one behind that bill, was really the sponsor of the bill. But even though the World War II and those of that followed the World War II get the benefit of it, the World War I veterans didn't get one dime benefit of it. They were already too old. No one World War I veteran got a home loan or got any World War I, got any training on the job training or anything like that. And in all the wars, from the Revolutionary War on, they have been giving something in recognition for their service. The Revolutionary War did, in the War of 1812 and on, and in the Spanish-American War, they were given. But the World War I veterans have never received anything. They did get a bonus in 1930s, recognizing that they worked for less wage than those that were that stayed home. So they were giving a bonus, but there was nothing has ever been given to the World War I veterans in recognition for his service. They have the veterans of prior wars. They got a bonus or land. There was a period there for that they didn't have much money, but they had a lot of land, and they gave them land. But the World War I veterans have never received anything. And the World War II and the following, they did get the benefit of home loans, the GI Bill, the benefits of it, and that's what I wanted to say.
Okay. You mentioned, and I don't know whether you want to go into any detail about that, that there really was also some fairly strong resentment within the American Legion when the World War I Veterans Organization came into being.
I was living in Oklahoma City at that time when the World War I organization was born. When I found out about it, I wanted to join. Of course, knowing some of our state officers, those at the department office, when they mentioned that, they advised against. They said it wouldn't amount to anything. That I was already in a veterans organization. They said they didn't need the World War I organization, and tried to keep me from joining. But I found out to this day the World War I organization is for and by the World War I veterans, and it means so much more to us. While I still am a member of the American Legion, love the American Legion, is there for years, and glad to continue to be a member. But my services and my work is for the World War I's. I visit nursing homes or do such work as that, but the World War I is hardly mentioned in the American Legion magazine now. Occasionally I see some reference or something that of help to the to the World War I veterans, but there's so little that if we had not organized our own organization and working for our benefits, we would just be practically left out in the cold now.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your taking the time to go back over that, and we'll just consider that the end of the interview. You have no objection to the...
No, I have no objection whatsoever.
Thank you very much.
Because it's true.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Niedermaier.